We only know ourselves in relationship to other people. If you lived on a deserted island, you would really have no true context for who you are as a person. But in that, even more importantly, we develop what we think of as social identities. And social identities is really about the groups to which we belong. And that membership in those groups often is not of our choosing, right? So, social identities are based on different characteristics. And these are 10 areas here that tend to be very important with regard to how people in this country experience life, how they experience systems, institutions, community, and daily life. And so these characteristics are important. And I'm going to go a little bit more deeply into it. So, social identities are the process by which we organize ourselves into these social groups. And those social groups, in many ways, determine how we are in relationship with one another. Once we identify with the social group, we tend to take on norms, things that we have in common with people who we consider to be like us. And a lot of that is unspoken, right? So, whatever that social identification is, we can sort of point to those things pretty quickly. Then, and even more importantly, is once we are a part of a social group and we, sort of are in alignment with that identification, we start to go through a process that social psychologists talk about as social comparison. And this is really important. We start to look at our group as the in group and everybody else's group as the out group, right? And as such, we are looking to position our group to have more social standing than other groups. We want prestige for our group, and so we act accordingly, right? And this is considered to be a very normal and a very human thing to do. And in that, what we're doing is assigning value to different social identities, valuing some groups more and valuing some groups less. Where this becomes really important for us and our context as a society is around the concepts of privilege and oppression. So often when we talk about privilege and oppression, people get tense and they get sort of stressed out about it because they think that in some way it is a character judgment to say to someone that they have privilege or to actually say that they're oppressed. People take that in a way that's very personal, and it's understandable because I think that they're both widely misunderstood. So privilege, if you have a privileged identity, it means that society has chosen to value your identity over other identities within that same characteristic, right? That's not because of anything that you've done or you failed to do. That's just because society, and often at a systemic level, has decided that some people are more important with a particular identity than others. As a result, there are certain things about which you may not have to worry if you have privilege. Conversely, if you have oppressed identities, you may experience targeting and marginalization. And that's not because of anything that you've done or you failed to do. That is because society has decided to value that identity less, right? So the example that I give people with regard to privilege and oppression, and this is very personal for me, is that about 4 years ago, my mother had a back surgery that went horribly wrong. And in that, my mother went from being a person who actually had the privilege of being able bodied and moved into a new category of being a person who was living with a physical disability. Now, the interesting thing is that last year on my mother's bucket list was that she had to see Michael Bolton in concert. And so I made that happen. We get to the Michael Bolton concert early, like an hour and a half early. Who would have thought everybody would have been already lined up? But that's exactly the way that it worked out. And what I realized was my mom was not going to be able to stand in line for an hour and a half. I go to the front and I ask them for where they have access for people with disabilities. And they said, oh, she's in a wheelchair. And I said, no, she uses a rollator, but she won't be able to stand in the line for that long. Their response was, well, if she's not in a wheelchair, she can't get access. And I said, well, she is actually legally classified as someone with a physical disability. So of course she should be able to get access. Eventually we were able to work it out. But the point is this: for me, I have able-bodied privilege. I was able to leverage my able bodied privilege to get access for my mother, who actually is now a part of an oppressed group as a person with a physical disability. I never thought of my able bodied privilege until I actually had someone with whom I was in close relationship and I understood that there are things that she now has to worry about that I don't have to worry about. So hopefully that gives you an example. Privilege is not just about getting benefit or unearned benefit. That is a part of it, yes, but it's also to think about what are the things with which you don't have to concern yourself.